You're tuned in to the Restaurant RockStars Podcast. Powerful ideas to rock your restaurant. Here's your host, Roger Bodwin.
Hey guys, it's Roger back at you, and thanks for tuning in. You know, very few restaurants are very effective marketers. Of course, this is the business of 1,000 details, and you got to be good at so many different things, but marketing is so important. But marketing is just one side of the equation. What we're really talking about is brand building. Anybody can market anything, but very few people can build a powerful brand. A brand is an image, an aura, a message you send to your customers. It's based on inspiration. It's based on passion. It gets into logo design and fonts and colors and how you train your staff to become brand ambassadors for your business. And then we move on to social media, where everybody needs to be, and you need to make a statement. And also the power of influencer marketing, how you can create influencers that are such powerful, passionate believers in your business that they spread the word just because they like your place. They love your place. It's a part of them. Okay. In this big episode, I'm speaking with a marketing guru. Her name, Meg Prejzner. And she is the CEO of Hackett Brand Consulting, and they specialize in brand building. We're going to be talking about all of these things, about the image, the aura, about how to market and brand build your business. We'll talk about influencer marketing, online reviews, all the important stuff, so stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. This is the Restaurant RockStars Podcast, and these are engaging topics that help restaurants build their brands, rock their profits, and deliver amazing guest service experiences. We're really going to focus on the brand building piece today. With me is a marketing, public relations, social media, and brand strategy expert. Her name is Meg Prejzner, and she is with Hackett Brand Consulting. She is the CEO and founder of that company. Welcome to the show, Meg. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate chatting with you about all things marketing.
I'm excited to talk marketing. You know, that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I spent 20 plus years running restaurants. I'm back in the business today. And, you know, I dive deep into all these things. And that was one of the things that I focused on when I ran restaurants. You know, I often call this business, Meg, one of 1,000 details. With restaurants and hotels and hospitality operations, there are really so many moving pieces. And many restaurant operators find it difficult to become adept or expert at all of those things. You really can't be. So that's where the experts come in. So, you know, you focus on so many different things, but let's talk about what your services encompass, because one size doesn't fit all. You do so many things and you do so many things well. So you get a new typical client. Where do you begin? What questions do you ask? And how does the process start?
Yeah, so really, we do digital marketing and digital marketing services, but the bread and butter of what we do is PR, influencer marketing, social media. With that comes advertising, Google ads, just by the natural extension of it. But honestly, with everything I do, I start with strategy. So really getting to the root of why we're here. Why do we want to tackle marketing? You know, a lot of restaurant owners, they'll hear things like, they feel like they should be on Facebook, or they feel like they should be on Instagram. And often the question that I love to start with is why? You know, what are you hearing? But more importantly, what are your goals with this, right? Like, let's start at the beginning. Backtrack. You know, is it just awareness? Is it getting more people to your shop? You know, where are we at in your business? And then the strategy kind of guides what we do, how we do it, and what type of message we're trying to send.
That's really so important, of course. So there is a difference, of course, between brand strategy and marketing strategy, but there is an overlap there. Does it always begin with a well-defined marketing plan, and do you help a client sort of go through those steps and motions to create a marketing plan, and then, you know, step A, B, C, D, and we focus on priorities and we assign budgets to those things?
Yeah, exactly. So there is a lot of overlap. You're absolutely right. So with brand strategy, it's a lot about developing your voice, developing your brand. You know, how do we come to market? Some people are really well established in that, and some people have no idea. And so when you're grounded in that, then your marketing plan or your marketing strategy looks at how you come to life. Do we want to do PR? Do we want to do social media? Do we want to do ads? What is that right mix for that restaurant? But the branding piece of it really helps guide how you then come to life, right? So if we're trying to get awareness about thought leadership out there, something really cool they're doing for an event in the space, maybe PR is the way to go, or maybe it's social media with Eventbrite and really amplifying awareness of the event. But if you're a little bit wishy-washy on how you come to life, like you don't know what your voice is or who you're talking to, taking a step back and saying, okay, we know we're attracting families or we're attracting young 20-somethings, there's different audiences to play with, and how you talk to them really matters.
There's so many types of restaurants out there, and, hotel operators, large and small, and there are chains, and obviously the chains have all these things dialed. They have a magic formula, but, the typical independent operator out there, is running, perhaps many restaurants are running restaurants, but they're not necessarily thinking of their operation as a brand. And a brand encompasses so many different things. It's a logo, it's the colors, it's the font you use, it's an image and an aura that you want to project to the public. And it even gets down to, training the staff to become brand ambassadors and to understand your product and your restaurant or your hotel and your property so well that they can then spread the message, and that is, that has several benefits unto itself, because especially if we're talking about social media, isn't it a powerful thing if everybody on your team is so firmly grounded in your brand, they understand it so well, and they can then communicate, to their network and spread the word. Isn't it true? I mean, I'm sure you work with your clients with that in mind as well.
Yeah. And actually, part of our business, we focus on employee advocacy. It's such a huge part. It's something I'm really passionate about, because I think the best brand ambassadors are your employees and your team members. And in fact, I was just doing some research on thought leadership, and Richard Branson is the person who says, put your employees first, even before your customers, because if your employees come first, they'll treat your customers right, and the customers will do your word of mouth marketing for you, right? So especially with local, more independent retailers, or independent hotel chains and restaurants, your employees are your best asset, right? They live and breathe in the city that you are, or town that you are, and they are the ones who can be your biggest advocates for you. And more often than not, they're on social media, they're doing word of mouth marketing, telling people where they're working for. So really taking care of them first can go such a long way.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because impressions in hospitality are so important, and impressions are lasting ones. And unfortunately, human nature is you have a negative experience. So many people are quick to spread the word, because word of mouth is so powerful in hospitality, whether it is online or just face to face. And those impressions count. And if you don't train your staff, the flip side to this is they can actually do your business a disservice. They can sabotage your business if they're not trained to, say the right things and do the right things and be advocates for the business. I believe I've seen it happen over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people remember how you make them feel, right? And it's why some of these like white glove type of experiences that you go into, like a Ritz-Carlton, for example, they have everything polished with how they treat you, or 5-star hotels, right? They have people walking them from their car to the front desk.
Right.
But, and people, if you have a negative experience, they remember that as well. You could have 10 really great experiences and one really bad one, and maybe you never come back because of that. But the benefit of the smaller concepts are that, you are more hands-on with your employees, and you know them a bit more personally, and they take a lot of pride in that. And so I think all the way through, from whether an independent retailer or you're 1,000 chain concept, it's really about that experience and making sure the experience is great for your employees first and foremost, because if they love to work for you, they're going to love to come to work every day.
Let's get back to working with a new client and really formulating that marketing plan. So is there one or two or several interview sessions where you really get to know the client, and then you get to know the client's business, and then you figure out, who their target customer is, and, what the busiest day parts are, and what the hidden opportunities are that they might be missing, and building traffic on slower days or nights, that sort of thing. I mean, it's all encompassing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really important. So whenever we bring on a new client, we start with a discovery call.
Okay.
And this is really, it could be like a 2 to 4 hour session, depending on how long. Sometimes we break it up because 4 hours is a long time to sit. But the discovery call really dives into the brand and the why behind it all. So we're asking questions of not only why we hear marketing, but tell us your story. I want to hear why you started this concept, or I want to hear what led you to, be a brand marketer for this concept. Tell me all about it. Tell me about your CEO. Tell me about your owners. Let's dive into everything that comes up into the point of marketing itself. And then once we get to the marketing of it, really we switch gears a little bit. So moving from the why to understand what the customer journey is. So I hear a lot of times people will think about their customer journey in terms of when people are buying stuff or when their purchasing habits are. But really, customers are backtracking even beyond that, right? So if you think of a hotel concept, sure, they're staying with you for an extension of their stay, whether they're in Denver visiting family or they're in San Francisco on vacation or going somewhere for work. But their point of decision making for the customer is before they're there. And so we really work to understand what that customer journey is, both perceived by the client itself, but also doing a lot of research behind the scenes to dive in and see, okay, here's where we think our customers are. Here's the point of the journey that we want to dive into awareness to get their attention, all the way through to the point where they're actually making the intention to purchase whatever product it is that you're selling.
Something you mentioned just triggers the thought of secret shoppers, because you clearly work with clients, perhaps globally, regionally, nationally, that sort of thing. And you can't visit every location to sort of get a really good feel for what that operation is, face to face or personally. Do you employ any secret shopper services? Do you recommend that restaurants do that, and you take those reviews and sort of formulate what people's impressions and experiences are like in a particular property?
Yeah, so I don't personally, through Hackett, do secret shopping, but I do advocate for it. There's plenty of people who do secret shopping, and they know you can hire them out and they will go through a list and they're looking for specific key points. But it isn't a tremendous learning experience to go through and see what the experience is for a customer who's new to the brand, but also to sit down with existing customers. What makes them come back to your restaurant? What brings them in, more than once a week if they're loyal fans and they're coming every day or twice a week? What makes them maybe shy away from coming more often? So not just secret shopping to understand the experience the first time, but also, doing live interviews and sitting down with customers and understanding like what it is that they love about you and maybe what it is that they don't. People are a little bit shy to give that negative feedback face to face. So it's always good to go experience it. But if you just listen a little bit, go on Twitter, go on Yelp reviews or Google reviews and listen, there's probably a thread there that you can see.
That's true.
Where negative reviews or even positive reviews are coming out.
I guess I asked that question because before you drive the world to a property's door with this amazing marketing and brand strategy, you got to make sure that the housekeeping is in order and that the customers that do come for the first time have a positive experience. Yeah. I'll give you a case in point. My wife and I last summer were staying at a boutique hotel just outside of Boston, Mass. For a friend's birthday party. And this was a high-end property, and it was a really nice hotel. We had never been there before, but, the reviews were pretty good, but our experience was less than stellar for a variety of reasons. But one quick example, the check-in process was flawless. The person behind the desk that greeted us and checked us in, very efficient, very professional, very knowledgeable about the area. I mean, we knew Boston. We didn't ask a lot of questions, but you could tell she was well-trained. But as soon as we got into the elevator, two things happened. The very first thing is when we stopped on our floor, it was sort of a double-sided
elevator, and for some reason, the door that opened first that we were about to step into opened into a maintenance closet. And we almost walked in, and here's all these shelves with chemicals on the walls and mops and buckets and stuff. And then our door opened on the opposite side to get out to the hallway. And I'm like, that should never happen. That was our first impression. And then walking down the hallway to our room, you could tell that the housekeepers had just literally thrown all the linens, the dirty linens, out into the hallway. We walked past a bunch of dirty linens, walking around that. And now there's room service dishes and trays outside of another door. And these are the details that matter when someone's checking into a property. That's housekeeping, the basics, right? The same thing happens in restaurants.
Yeah.
And then we walked into our room, and it looked like a family had stayed there because the windows, the sun was shining through the window. And as we walked through, the first thing you saw were all these kids' fingerprints or handprints all over the windows, and these were 3 negatives right off the bat in an otherwise high-end, somewhat, not inexpensive property. So I just say that because that's very, very important to make sure that all those details happen before you drive new business.
I agree with that full-heartedly. And my eyes kind of widen at your experience. And the experience you had at that hotel really translates to restaurants as well, right?
Yes, it does.
You can have the best food in the world and the best team in the world. But if you walk into a restaurant and the garbage is overflowing or it's dirty around where they're preparing your food, you're wondering, like, how well are they taking care of this food? Am I going to get sick? Like, how clean really is this place? Like, it raises a lot of red flags in your head as a customer. And when I was working at Qdoba and leading brand marketing, and there are 700 plus restaurant chains. So it takes a lot of operations, and they do a stellar job of, getting people in tip-top shape. But we can do all the marketing we want in the world. But if a customer comes in and their experience with an employee or with dirtiness doesn't match that, it's like, cool graphic, food's dirty. It's like you have that disconnect. And so you really want to make sure that the experience, and when you say branding, resonates from top to bottom, right? Like all the way through. It's from the moment they see you online and their experience on a website, booking your hotel or choosing your restaurant, all the way through to that experience. And even when you leave, right? You don't want to have some type of disconnect, and that can really be a turnoff for customers, especially cleanliness. That's, a huge one that just is a no-go.
Well, that's funny because, that probably doesn't reach into most restaurant or hospitality marketing plans, but every aspect of what you just said is part of the marketing. The food is the marketing. The service that you receive is the marketing, the cleanliness of the place and the quality that's presented. It's not just about graphics and about logos and websites and, who we think we are and mission statements and all that. It's everything. So I hope the audience is paying attention because there are literally so many details to what we're talking about. Let's dive into social media. Okay, what's important? What are the best or most effective platforms right now for restaurants? And let's talk about that, and then let's talk about frequency of posts and what to post and who should post, and who the personality behind the posting should be in a typical property.
Yeah. So how you show up on social media is a big one, right? I advocate that it's a must today, especially for younger audiences, or maybe even not that young as millennials. We grow up, right? But they're online, and whether you're online or not, they're online. And so they're looking for you. And then, so how you show up is, I typically recommend, if you're new to social media, is starting with 2 channels, really get a well-oiled machine going. And typically that's Facebook and Instagram because they work together. So if you run ads, you can get the benefit of the shared platform. But understanding that the different platforms work differently is a big factor because, Twitter is immediate. People expect responses immediate. They're going there for news. The way they use Twitter is different than Instagram, which is highly visual, right? They want to go and look at beautiful food or beautiful restaurants and beautiful hotels and the chandeliers and everything that comes along with it. And it's such a different experience channel by channel. And so how you show up on those channels can really be determined by which channel you're on. But also, going back to that brand voice is like being really true to your brand, right? So if you're a family style brand, and you cater to, say you have daycare for kids at your hotel and you have shuttle services to Disney World and those types of things, you don't want to be on Instagram trying to appeal to an 18-year-old who wants to go out, say for example in Orlando at Disney World, and wants to go out to the bars. Be true to who you are and show up how you are, and because customers will see right through it. Social media is very transparent. People can see through those lines. And so really, I think first and foremost, starting with 1 to 2 channels, owning that before you expand. And then once you are in a place to expand, look at how people are using those channels, and then put that together with how you want to show up as a brand.
And do you often recommend that professional photography is a must if you're posting photos of the food or the menu items, that sort of thing? It's not just an iPhone, let's take a picture of tonight's special and throw it up on social media. I mean, do people do that? I mean, what do you suggest?
I mean, they do. And I think it's an interesting question to ask because phones these days have really high quality photos. But if you are taking pictures, I recommend, if you take pictures yourself, make sure that they'll do your research, make sure the lighting is good, make sure the plating is well. I think it's an interesting question to backtrack because we're seeing a shift on social media where people are looking for authenticity. And so where, leading up into this point, people wanted really highly stylized photos of influencers and beautiful stage things. Those certainly still have their place. Yeah. But people are looking more and more for authenticity. And so they're also looking at what customers are posting. What does this food actually look like? And I think of some of the major like burger chains, for example, right? They'll have these beautiful pictures of their food, but you get the burger and it looks a little different. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's a good burger, but you want to kind of show up how you really show up. So going back to our early conversation where there's not a disconnect between the customer experience and what they're seeing online. And so, yes, if you can afford professional photos and all of that, like definitely show put your best foot forward. But, I think that there's also room to play with some more authentic, real in-restaurant experiences, especially on the likes of stories. Like Instagram stories are very forgiving. So if you're trying a new recipe or something like that, you don't need to have that highly stylized imagery.
How do you stand apart from your competitors that might be on the same platforms posting just as frequently as you are? And how do you avoid being too salesy, perhaps, and selling out versus presenting an authentic message that really intrigues and compels people to come in?
Yeah, so that one I think really comes back to rooting who you are. What products do you offer that are different from your customers? A lot of people say, oh, like it's the same, a hotel is a hotel is a hotel, but that's not necessarily the case, right? So you may have different customer service, or you may have a different check-in process, or even something about the hotel room, right? Really leaning into what makes you different and makes you unique and what can set you apart from the crowd. Can go a long way. So in the restaurant industry, we call these table stakes, right? You must have a clean restaurant. You must have, certain hours of the day you're open. You must have, employees that treat you well. There are certain types of table stakes that are, if you miss those, you're going to have a bad experience. But above and beyond those table stakes, what set you apart? Once upon a time, it was Wi-Fi, but now every place has Wi-Fi and people come to expect that.
Of course.
So highlighting the fact that you have Wi-Fi is probably not going to differentiate you. You want to get into more nuanced experiences that are true to you. And oftentimes that just comes from looking in. A lot of times people are looking out. But if you look inside and you think, what value am I bringing to the customer? And get in that customer frame point, then they'll tell you that.
So finding an owner, operator, or a general manager who's been in this business a long, long time, that is also extremely tech savvy, that is really familiar with the ins and outs of all these platforms is somewhat rare. Clearly there are people out there that are amazing restaurant operators, and they're also super marketers, and, they're all over this stuff. But let's just put ourselves into, the average typical restaurant owner operator. Do you ever suggest that they find somebody on the staff that's really, really savvy with this, that has a good understanding of the property, and trust and empower them to be the brand, face of that restaurant on social media?
Yeah, so I've actually seen this, and I work with a local shop here that does this.
Yeah.
And they have a few team members that are really savvy in social media, but not that just that they took a liking to it. When the owner came to them and asked, who would be interested, and they immediately raised their hand, and they've been killing it on social media. But it's a really interesting dynamic because the day job comes first, right? So first things first is you're in the store with customers, and that will always come first. And so you have a couple options as an owner or an operator. And one is that you can, if you do have team members who are really savvy and really interested in growing and can do it well, is to embrace that and perhaps carve out time, part of their schedule to do that, which can be really hard in the service industry when you're on routine and getting people through the line or have a certain standards. But it works really well because they're your brand advocates, right? They're the people who are with your customers. They know what they're looking for. And if they love your brand or your business, they're going to do it better than an agency at times. But the negative to that is, again, they have a day job that often comes first. And so you have to, as a manager, really make sure that they know what to prioritize as part of their work, so that social media doesn't just fall away or do really good when it's slow and then drop off when it's not. And maybe also put some resources behind it. So the local shop I work for, they actually, I'll come in quarterly and do workshops with them to troubleshoot some of the situations that they're facing. What are their challenges? What can't they get over? What's changing in social media? Because it happens so quickly,
It really does.
And so we sit down and we do these workshops quarterly where we can chat through it, and I come to the table with some ideas for them, and then they go and they execute it really well.
So for a typical property, restaurant, hotel, enterprise, do you suggest that there's a certain sweet spot in frequency of posting? And is it different or similar or the same in different properties across the country in terms of timing? Like what days to post? What time of day do you post? That sort of thing. I mean, this is pretty critical information, right?
Yeah. And there's a theory that I love that actually comes from Gary Vaynerchuk, and it's quantity determines quality. And so the more frequently you post, the more data you'll get, the more insights you get into what's working. And so Instagram, for example, is a really unique one because there's this kind of sweet spot where about 2 a.m., if you post you put it on scheduled posts, that performs the best, right? But like logic would have it that people are sleeping, right? Like even so 2 a.m. in New York is midnight in Denver, right? And so it's kind of counterintuitive to what you would think. And so the only way to test that is to post at those times and schedule posts and see, maybe this is the first thing the person sees when they wake up and they check their alarm and then they look at Instagram and look at your post. But LinkedIn and Facebook have different times because of user behavior. But I think what's really interesting is you don't know until you try it. And so I always advise, at the beginning, starting with quantity that doesn't feel like spam, make sure your content is still good and you're not just posting to post. And then looking to see what resonates based on that, and also by channel, because that makes a big difference. And, you can post as a restaurant, you're thinking, okay, like people come in for lunch, let's post at 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. every single day. But there's a possibility that people are talking with their coworkers the day before about going to lunch the next day and choosing a point in time, the day before. And so you may actually have better resonance when it's like 4 p.m. in between lunch and in between dinner. People are starting to get hungry for dinner and they're like, hey, you guys want to go to lunch tomorrow? But you don't know until you try it. And so I think if you go with the quantity over quality and really pay attention to what your audiences are telling you on social media, you'll learn a lot, and then you can scale back and refine what's working based on that.
How important is variety in what to post? Let's say you've got a whole tool bag, you've got photos of the food, you've got special promotions, what's happening this weekend, live events, music, entertainment, that sort of thing, discounts and deals, menu items, lunch specials, today's special is. I mean, that's a whole bunch of different stuff. I mean, there's a whole strategy around what to post, right? And when to post all those different things, and the variety versus consistency of over and over again reinforcing the same message versus being all over the map.
Yeah, I mean, I think consistency is king or queen. And so consistency is there, right? And it's something like somebody has to see your brand 8 times before they resonate. And there's different stats about how often and how much. But people are a creature of habit. They have habits that they like to form. They're routine based. And so the more consistently you can be in front of them, the more they'll come to recognize that. And then you can introduce variety, right? Because there are different things that appeal to different people. So some people want a happy hour deal. Other people want to come in for a business work lunch. And how do you target both of those people? But if you consistently post a message over and over that, hey, we have happy hour every Thursday from 4 to 6, and when I say over and over, I don't mean every day of the week until Thursday.
Right.
But week after week, every Wednesday and Thursday, you're posting as a reminder. Eventually, that will get some stickiness to it, and people will remember that when they're looking for happy hour, that comes up. And so it's the consistency of it, and then variety. Variety is great to switch things up, but I think really relying on figuring out what's working, getting into the consistency of making sure you're posting, people can expect when you're posting, and then introducing new things. And oftentimes that's more disruptive, right? So when we were at Qdoba, relying on that example, we have queso, and that was like our huge differentiator for a long time from Chipotle.
Yes.
And we had queso. But after, I think it was like 14 or 15 years in business, we introduced 2 new quesos. And they just went off the charts because we only had one queso for so long that people came to love. And, disrupting it with a little bit of variety did really well. And so much so that when we did a social media voting contest where people could vote for which one of the 2 new quesos they loved, it got a lot of recognition in the industry for just like such a simple concept. And it did really well. And it became one of them became a permanent menu item for fans. But, I think if you were to do that and introduce a new queso every single week, you lose that kind of disruption of variety. And so it's really about striking that balance and bringing it to life.
Very good point. Let's talk about Facebook and Instagram and algorithms and regular posts versus paid advertising and how you really get your message across. Is it possible not to pay for pay for things and still get the impact you're looking for? Do you really have to boost posts and pay for ads now?
I think depending on who you talk to, you'll get different points of view with that.
Okay.
But I recommend posting if there's no algorithm. Posting as if there's no likes, being authentic to your brand, because when you do that, people follow you. They want to engage with you. And so it may take a little bit of a tough skin to break through some of these like, oh, why is this post only getting 5 likes and this post getting 1,000? And it can play a little bit of a mind trip on you as a person. But, if you're posting as if there's no algorithm and you're just posting because you want to get your message out there and you have some really killer new hotel you're opening or deal you're doing or product you want to serve, people will come to you. And then, I think where the ads come into play is that they amplify that message. And so rather than relying on ads to build your audience, which you can absolutely do, right? Like Facebook and Instagram both, when you set up ads, you can do so in a way that is toward fan growth. But you should ask yourself, what is the end business goal of this? If your goal is fan growth, then absolutely sure, do that, more eyeballs on your page and what you're pushing. But really, I think thinking more about it as a way to amplify what you're already doing is where paid media can really come in and support it. If you took it outside of social media, right, like and put it towards your website, and you're like, how do I get more people towards my website, right? Well, the first thing you want to do is make sure that your SEO, your search engine optimization, is spot on. And then, and make sure that you have a nice website that doesn't detract people once they're there, where they click away. And then when you do Google ads or Google display ads, and they search for you, you're going to drive more people to your site because Google search ads are supplementing the search engine behind your website. But if you don't put some of those initial nuts and bolts into place, then you can run ads and it'll run people to your website, but not as efficiently and effectively had you just built it right to begin with.
Good point. Let's switch gears and talk about online reviews. They're obviously critically important. And as an owner or manager, you should be monitoring those on a daily basis. But, positive posts are great and 5-star reviews are amazing. But what happens when, a customer is less than pleased? How do we really respond to a negative review? How do we engage in an appropriate way without creating a firestorm of a thread where all sorts of people jump in and now you got yourself into a deeper mess and that sort of thing? And the public can be really unforgiving. Let's talk about raising prices. Minimum wage is rising often in many states and costs are rising constantly. And customers that frequent a restaurant notice when prices increase, but they don't understand there's a reason behind it. Sometimes they think, the owner's just getting greedy and he's overcharging for that. But just to stay in business, you've got to continually raise prices to keep up. I mean, that's just one example, but it's like all of a sudden there's a negative post. How should a restaurant respond? And clearly the customer isn't always right, even though that's an old adage. In some cases they are, and in some cases they're not. What would you suggest? I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot there. You know what I mean?
I love this question, and I worked with an incredible operator. He worked for a number of really large chains across different industries, and like 30-year veteran in the space. And he would always say, the customer isn't always right, but we'll make it right.
I love
that.
And
to me, that sat with me, and him and I would work really closely because when you're a marketer and you're on social media, you're seeing those complaints come in. Or, my background is in PR. And so I've dealt with a number of crisis communications throughout
Damage
the years.
Control. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you have to work really closely with the operators. If something does go wrong, what happened? Tell me the employee's perspective. Tell me what the customer's perspective is. And then let's tackle this, with the right way that addresses both concerns. But I think I really loved his message always of the customer isn't.
I like that.
Always right, but we'll make it right. And that goes a long way, right? Kindness goes a long way. And so when you do see bad reviews or customers upset in your restaurant or hotel, you acknowledging them and just saying you're sorry for their experience or whatever they may be going to, you're just sorry to hear that, goes so tremendously far. And then, not taking it personally can also help with that, right? So, a lot of times if you're the chef or this is your hotel, it's easy to be a little bit defensive. You feel like almost as if they're attacking you. But if you just come at it from that lens of what can I do to make this right? That'll often be a really good guide for how you can respond to people in those reviews. Or maybe even just ask them that question, what can we do to improve this, or what can we do to make it right for you?
You know, a restaurant operator is a friend of mine. We both serve on the board of what is called Hospitality Maine. It's the trade association in the state of Maine. And he has a very beautiful restaurant and a successful property. But, you know, he's very interested in his online reviews all the time. He spends a lot of time there, and he had a really unique situation or solution to turning around a negative situation, I should say. And it was so innovative. I'd never heard of that. I'm like, that's a great idea. And what he does is when he gets a negative complaint, he turns it into a positive by inviting those people back in to be a secret shopper. He gives them an experience in exchange for the feedback. And one, how did we improve, and where else can we improve? And if that's not going to create customers for life and loyal people, I mean, what a positive spin that was. I love that idea.
Yeah, I love that.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, my eyes light up because I'm like, wow, that is ingenious. But I think it puts the power back in the hands of the person who had the bad experience and allows them the chance to rectify it and even have their voice heard. More often than not, that's what people are looking for, right? They're upset. They had a bad lunch. They had a bad night stay, and simply making it right. And you know, I think his approach is genius because you're inviting people to say, okay, this experience was bad. Would you mind helping us in the future? You know, so that others don't have the same experience. And you find this quite a bit, even if you were to take it outside of the restaurants or what have you, with people who just maybe have a bad experience because their kid was having a bad day. And, you know, the parent's in a bad mood and maybe the restaurant wasn't as kid-friendly as it could have been, or the employee is 19 and doesn't know like what to do, right? There's a variety of situations that people can land themselves in, but you know, opening the door and opening that line of communication really helps. That is the goal of social media, right? Is that it's social, it's two-way communication, and so keeping that in mind, you know, that it's a person at the other end and it's their experience can go a long way.
Well, these thoughts are a perfect segue into what I would consider to be the meat of this episode, and that is influencer marketing. And I want to dive deep into what that means. If you could first define influencer marketing, and then let's talk about whether that's an organic process or if it's a planned strategic process and everywhere that takes us.
Yeah, so influencer marketing is, if I were to define it, I would say it's just the power of influence, right? The power of people and the ultimate word of mouth marketing. And that's not very sophisticated. And I think a lot of people like to think of it as this like whole nuanced strategy behind things, but really influencers are people. And what you're doing is creating relationships with people who have influence over others, or influence in some way. And it's no different than, you know, the head of a household having influence over a choice of where the family stays for the evening, right? So it's about really connecting with those people who you can in turn market to their audience in. And I find it fascinating because a lot of people consider influencer marketing the wild, wild west, or they consider it this like unknown, uncharted territory. But I love it. And I think that if you put the human or the people back into influencers and influencer marketing and just think of them as relationship building, it flips the whole script on how you can approach influencer marketing and makes it much more approachable, much more relatable, and can really, really guide a lot of what you do.
That's fantastic. Well, this has been a tremendous episode, Meg. I really appreciate your sharing your expertise. And I want to also share your website. That is HackettBrandConsulting.com. And Hackett, of course, is HACKETT, right? Brandconsulting.com. What other social media handles can people find you on, or how can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, and you can search for me by my name. And then you can also find me on my personal channels, which is at Meg Prez. My last name's difficult, so it's just Meg, Meg, Prez, Prez.
Oh, it's a Z. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Well, it's fantastic. I can't thank you enough. You've given us so many insights into marketing and brand strategy and social media and online reviews and lastly, influencer marketing. So I'm hoping our audience reaches out to you. But if you go to that website, there is lots of resources there and you can learn so much about what you should be doing to put your best foot forward in front of your customer, your target audience, just by going to hackettbrandconsulting.com. Thanks again, Meg. That was the Restaurant RockStars podcast, and we will see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. I hope that was an eye-opener and a wake-up call. You got to get out there and you got to dominate the competition. And the only way to do that is to continually build, sustain, reinforce your brand, and make sure everyone becomes a passionate follower and believer in what you're doing. There's nothing more powerful than that. So thanks for listening as always. You know, one of the things that really strikes me in terms of return on investment is the power of your menu. Your menu is your most powerful marketing tool because every customer sees it. But I continually see so often with my clients that they've just designed their menu in the wrong way. Sure, there's variety and appeal to the customer, but they're leaving the profit piece to chance. What do I mean by that? They've designed menus where there's such a huge difference in profit in each category from one item to the next, and in most cases we find out that the lower profit items are taking sales away, taking lots of sales away from the higher profit items. But you're paying your kitchen staff just as much to prepare the low profit versus the high profit. So why not re-engineer and redesign your menu? Because very few restaurateurs wake up every day saying, you know what? It's really possible to have a menu where every single item in each category contributes a similar, if not equal profit. That's the goal. I've identified this with so many clients, and I found out recently with a regular client that I've been working with that their menu has lost them $183,000 in the last 6 months, just 6 months alone. That's over $300,000 a year just because lower profit items are taking so many sales away from the higher profit items. So what can you do? Reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about this. I have a 30-minute consultation, absolutely free. All you got to do is email me, Roger, R-O-G-E-R, at restaurantrockstars.com. I'd love to talk to you. That's what it's all about, folks. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a review on iTunes. It will help other restaurateurs, hospitality professionals, and managers find us. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Restaurant RockStars Podcast. For lots of great resources, head over to restaurantrockstars.com. See you next time.